Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Stephanie Lamb. I'm a natural language specialist at VivLab Samsung Electronics. And today we're going to be talking about natural language, or NL, training. The reason why we want to focus a whole session on just training is because we want to think of natural language training as the front door to our capsules. So if we imagine, we have all of this really elegant code handling, really rich layouts with Bixby views, and even witty dialogue. Ultimately, our users are going to be interacting with Bixby based on all the complexities of natural human language. So we really want to ground that user experience with strong NL training. All right, so today we'll be focusing on best practices for Bixby. There you go. All right, and so we'll be talking about several topics today. Bixby 101 was a session earlier today that is actually a prerequisite for this session, but if you didn't have a chance to attend, we'll go over some of the key terms. I'll also be demoing Movie Agent, which is the sample capsule we were using throughout our sessions and in our code lab, our code puzzles, and giving you a demo of how to add training to Bixby Studio. Then we'll be following up with how to define our training set, so how to decide what exactly we want to train in the first place. And of course, this is a conversational assistant, so we want to think about all the different ways that we are going to map the layers of a conversation. Followed by, we're going to test our utterances that we're training, which is a really, really important step and kind of follows up with a common question I hear a lot. How many examples do I need to train before Bixby can interpret on its own? And then lastly, we'll be taking a step back to talk about data quality overall. So the stronger our training set is, the more Bixby can correctly and accurately interpret. So here's the recap. For anyone who's not sure, training is the set of example utterances that we're using to train Bixby's AI to understand natural human language. And this is a step that is continuously appearing and you're working on throughout the development cycle. The goal, whenever we're talking about goals, we're talking about the objective of the utterance. This is often mapped to a concept. So for example, a movie or a movie genre in the case of Movie Agent. Actions are something that we can kind of think of almost like verbs. They're the operation that Bixby is performing on behalf of the user. So again, in Movie Agent, we're finding a movie and we're trying to run a quiz to help users land on a movie recommendation. Sorry, my key's stuck. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just open up PowerPoint again. All right, there we go. So concepts I just mentioned, they are the concrete or abstract real-world entities derived from natural language inputs. So we can kind of imagine those almost like nouns, the notions of what a movie is, what a genre is, what an actor or director's name is. And again, we often map our utterance goals to a concept. Plans we'll be taking a look at shortly. It is the procedure that Bixby builds to execute a goal based on user-provided inputs. So if you had a chance to go to the dynamic program generation kiosk earlier, that's what we're looking at, the plan. Routes are a little bit more of an advanced topic for training, so we'll be talking about that later on in the session. But this is essentially what tells the planner to go through a waypoint to reinforce a goal and to pull in more information or prompts the user for more information to execute a goal. So I'm going to show you how we are using Movie Agent, or what the capabilities of Movie Agent are. I'm going to zoom in so you can see better. Okay. So let's start with something simple. Maybe you want to use Movie Agent to find a particular genre of a movie. So here's a list of action movies. So the utterance, if you can't see it, is find action movies. I'm going to hit enter to run the utterance. And so now we have a result view with a list of action movies. So Movie Agent is a capsule where you can query a database based on certain inputs like genre, actors' names, or movie titles. Another thing is, maybe you just want to see a broader view of what movies are available to the database. So we can try something like find a movie. And we have now a list of all these different genres that we can either tap on or use our voice to select. But with Movie Agent, we can also get a recommendation based on a fun quiz. So if you're not sure, maybe you're sitting on the couch and you're not sure what you want to watch, you can say, help me choose. And that will launch a fun quiz that you can take to get a movie recommendation based on the answers to these quiz questions. So I'll just show you briefly. I like rare steak, and I think maybe Frida Kahlo would be fun to hang out with over the weekend, and no kids. So now I have a movie recommendation, which is a crime movie. But maybe I've already seen this movie, and I want to, on this result view, pivot and refine the results even further. So I could say something here like, how about ones released last year? So here, I'm refining these results. So now that the top result is a movie from 2018. And so we can continue the conversation, extending the context from the previous utterance. So that's Movie Agent in a nutshell. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here. OK, so once again, Movie Agent, it's essentially the travel agent that is helping you plan your itinerary on a trip. So it's going to help you decide what to watch. We're going to be using different inputs to query the movie database that we're using for our API. So we could use things like genre, person name, movie title, and release dates. And again, we can use a fun quiz to get the final movie recommendation based on our quiz answers. So we're focusing on training here. So here we can see our training tab. So let's do that in Bixby Studio. Everyone can see OK? So this capsule is already available to you on GitHub. It's public, so you can go to the code lab area. Maybe some of you already have. But when you want to look at training, you go to under the resources folder here. Maybe I need to zoom in a little bit more. Oh, sorry, I keep getting kicked out. Just 1 second. Can you magnify the text? Sure, I'll do that. All right, I'm back in. So I'm going to magnify the text a little bit more for you. There we go. OK, so here we are. We just opened the Bixby Studio with Movie Agent capsule loaded. Keep in mind, if you're building a capsule from scratch, you would have to create your own training folder or a file. So the way you would do that was just right-click Resources, New, and then you have training here. But we already have this available to us on GitHub. So you can see we have a total of 29 training examples already. So let's try adding examples. Let's do something pretty basic like what movie should I watch? I tend to use pretty standard uppercase, lowercase, but it actually doesn't have any influence on the interpretation. So you could use all lowercase if you want. You could add question marks and punctuation if you'd like, but I tend to omit it. So I'm going to hit enter to add this. And so we already have suggested training below. And this is based off of the 29 utterances we saw earlier after compiling the model. Bixby is generalizing an interpretation. And in this case, it's correct, but just for the sake of going through this step by step, I'll just ignore it. So our goal, again, is a concept, a primitive concept, movie. What are we looking for? We're searching for a movie. And we don't need to tag anything else here. So we're not specifying any other inputs like genre or actors' names. So we're just going to have movie as our goal, and we can take a look at the planner here. And we can see that the goal is the only node in our planner, as expected. So we're going to save this. And the status here says not learned. This is the default status anytime you add training and you haven't compiled your model yet. So you're going to click compile, and the status updates to learned. So next, let's try something with more specific inputs. So how about find, or we have a lot of find utterances already. Yeah, we have 8, so let's try something different. Show me horror movies with Anthony Hopkins. Okay, so we're going to add this. And again, we have suggested training here, but we're missing an input here. So we can't always rely on the suggested training. If we have a brand new capsule and only a few dozen training examples, we want to try to flesh it out a little bit more. So let's add the goal as movie. And we know horror is going to be an input movie genre. When we type this in, we see all these other values, genre values, comedy, crime, documentary. So if we try to ignore it, what happens? We see enum Boolean type requires a symbol. So we're going to add horror here and save it. Anthony Hopkins is going to be a person name. We're using person name because this is also, this could contain also actors, directors, producers. So person name, and this is a name type concept, so we are not required to have a symbol here, a value. And the reason for that is because you can imagine with movie genres, there's pretty much a finite list of genres that you can have for a movie, whereas with actors, there would be countless different actors, actresses, and you wouldn't want to have an enum vocab to support that and type in each actor's name or each symbol corresponding to that actor. So we're going to do done here. We're going to take a look at the planner, and we can see this is what Bixby has written for us. So movie genre is being consumed by the action find movie, outputting movie, and the person name is going through another action called find movie, outputting person, which is being passed through find movie and movie. So this looks great. We're going to save it. And again, we're going to compile so we can update this status. Great. So it's learned. So that's some really basic use cases. But let's take a moment to talk about defining your training set in the first place. So how do you decide what are you going to train? Do you really just randomly type in utterances? There's some key considerations here. So when you are designing your capsule, you want to think about what goals your users are hoping to achieve with your capsule. So with Movie Agent, we're trying to achieve a list of movie recommendations. So our goal is movie. And we want to keep our goals succinct and tightly scoped for best goal classification. So if you want to have something a little bit more complex, you want to think about what use cases are going to apply to certain goals. So for example, so far we've trained pretty simple things like find horror movies or show movies with this actor. What happens if someone asks, what is Finding Nemo about? So this is kind of interesting because maybe your result view, if you tap on a movie, it'll give you a synopsis of that particular movie. So you decide, okay, I can train what is Finding Nemo about to a movie goal, and users can be satisfied that way. The catch here is you want to make sure that you are accurately reinforcing that use case. So if you have several utterances of find horror movies and find horror movies with Anthony Hopkins, but only 1 or 2 use cases of this kind of new area that you weren't originally planning, you have to remember that you need to reinforce that as well. So keeping your goals succinct and tightly scoped is really important so that you can have really accurate interpretation. So imagine if you are just, you had that one example about the Finding Nemo synopsis. You are also trying to consider the user's expectations from that point. So if the user starts seeing that, okay, now movie synopsis is supported, maybe it's a logical leap to think that, okay, so now I want to find movies about long-distance relationships or something. So there's a natural progression of how users may think one use case is supported for one goal, and now another may be supported for a different goal. Oops, here it's freezing again. Okay. And this is probably the most important. What are the most common and most natural utterances to reach those goals? So think about how users would speak to a voice assistant, not just how you as an engineer would type in something in the simulator to demonstrate a goal or an intent, and not how someone would just type in a search query on the internet. So this is something very important. We're thinking about conversation. So about conversation, let's think about the steps. So one, outer. So when we talk about outers, we're talking about the initial utterance of a conversation. So what movie should I watch? This is the first step to our conversation. And with continuations, we are talking about the follow-up utterances that rely on the context of the previous utterance. So an example of that would be, show the ones with Tom Hanks. So ones is referring back to movies, and the key thing here is show the ones with Tom Hanks would never be able to stand alone. You wouldn't be able to ask Bixby as the outer question, show the ones with Tom Hanks. Prompts are a request from Bixby for more information to complete execution of a goal. So we'll be talking more about that a little bit later. Movie Agent has a lot of prompt training, so this is a really good capsule to expose yourself to how prompts work. Just to show you the overview of how conversations look. So this is a continuation flow. We're going to start with the outer, show me horror movies. Underneath, we see aligned NL. Aligned NL, if you can see my cursor. Oh, no. So underneath, show me horror movies, you can see show me horror movies with this text format in front of it, G:'movie. And so this text format maps nodes in the planner to natural language. So this aligned NL is telling us that this NL has the goal movie. So now we have this result view of movies, horror movies, and then we can refine that with which ones came out last year. The aligned NL underneath that is telling us that the goal of this utterance is also movie as a continuation of the previous utterance with the goal movie. Last year is a tag for coming from our time capsule. So, I'm sorry, and the time capsule is a library capsule. We talk more about that in other sessions tomorrow, but daytime expression is the tag we're using here. So here are a few horror movies released last year, is that the refinement based on this continuation, so this follow-up. Next, we have prompts. What movie should I watch is the outer. And then here, we're being prompted to select a genre. So you could either tap or you could say, for example, here someone said comedy, and underneath is the aligned NL supporting that, and we can see the list of all the comedy movies from the database. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go back to the studio. One more thing. So with vocabulary, we saw something earlier. Well, when I trained show horror movies with Anthony Hopkins, maybe you're thinking, okay, so does this mean I need to train every permutation of genre or actors. So do I need to now show action movies with this person? So the answer is definitely not, and we encourage you to not do that and to use vocabulary to its full potential. So vocabulary reinforces primitive concepts. So movie genre, for example, we have this list of genres, and in the vocab file, we have synonyms that are mapped to those symbols. So for example, you see we have singular and plural here for thriller, so that would take care of anyone saying, find thriller movies or find a thriller movie. We also have hyphenated case or abbreviated cases here. We want to consider, how automatic speech recognition would display this movie or this genre. So if ASR, automatic speech recognition, finds science fiction movies with a hyphen, even if we have training without, this vocab will take care of it. We could also feasibly add synonyms like scary here. So people tend to say find scary movies, so we can add it here, and even if we have find horror movies, it's likely that would be covered. So let's demonstrate that by going to the simulator. Okay. So we have, I'll pull up training that has a goal of movie and a value movie genre. So total, we have 4 examples. So let's see how far this can take us. So I'm going to the simulator here. Reset. All right, so the examples, and just in case you can't see, it's find documentaries, find a fantasy movie, look for a sci-fi movie made before January 1995, show me horror movies with Anthony Hopkins, which we just trained. So let's try something a bit different and look for action movies made in 1989. So we're going to run this. And if you can't see, I'll zoom in. All right, so we can see right away that this worked based on the result view, action movies made in 1989. We can confirm this by going to the debugger and clicking on, this is the plan here, clicking on conversation and going to natural language. And we can see the interpreted aligned NL here, movie genre and daytime expression on the correct token or word. So I'm going to close this. All right, let's try something else. So find horror movies released in 2002. So I'm going to start this as a new, rather than resetting this and losing this utterance, I'm going to use a shortcut, Shift-Command-Enter, to refresh the conversation and run this as an outer example. So here are a few horror movies released in 2002. So once again, we can confirm this by checking the aligned NL. Looks good. You can see this right here. Horror movies is movie genre, and 2002 daytime expression with the goal of movie. All right, I'll try a third example. Recommend some comedies that came out last year. Okay, so once again, I'm just using Shift-Command-Enter to refresh the conversation. And so we see here are a few movies released last year. So we are missing one input. So let's just show that here. So this would mean we would need to train this utterance. This utterance was, maybe the syntax was too different to accurately generalize an interpretation. So I'm going to copy this aligned NL so that I can train it later. I'm going to copy it to my clipboard. Okay. And then I'll show you one more. Show me sci-fi movies with Keanu Reeves. So interestingly, this version of Movie Agent, we don't have a person name vocab. We just have movie genre vocab. And I don't have Keanu Reeves anywhere in the training. So let's see how this works. So show me sci-fi movies with Keanu Reeves. Again, I'm going to reset the conversation and run this as an outer. And this works. So we have enough training with person name, despite not having the vocab, that Bixby was able to accurately interpret this as a person name, despite not having the vocab there. So what we ended up seeing here is we had 4 examples trained with these inputs, and we tested 4. One of them we do need to add, that comedy one I showed you. So if I wanted to add that, I could do this, and then just simply tag accept, comedy here, and save this. And so to answer this question that I'm frequently hearing, how many training examples do I need? It really depends on your capsule and the complexity of your capsule, the complexity of the different NL inputs you're accepting, and your natural language. But we just saw is, we had 4 examples, and we were able to get 3 due to our strong foundation and our vocab. So you're ultimately, saving a lot of time by having this vocab and training in your capsule already. But there is no concrete heuristic where if you have X number of features, you are required to have Y number of use cases. Ultimately, you need to be testing your utterances in the simulator often, and I'll show you how to do that shortly. Okay. So, sorry. Okay, so training. It's an iterative cycle, and these strategies I'm mentioning where you should be having these really strong core use cases and this strong vocab to help optimize your training overall. One thing to keep in mind is that this is an iterative cycle, just like any sort of machine learning project. So you start with your model, and then you add training. You're going to test your training, and then retrain and retest, and possibly even remodel. So this is a natural, healthy cycle, and we're always trying to aim for 100% learned utterances, and I'll show you how to do that at the end of the session. We also want to be adding diverse training as another strategy. So we're not just training fines, horror movies, we're also training different genres as well. We want to be checking our annotations and plans to make sure that all of our inputs are being consumed by the right actions. So for example, we don't want to do something like this. If we tried, who is the lead actor in Forrest Gump? If we try to add this, knowing we have some concepts already that would take care of this, so in this case, we're not looking for a movie, we're looking for a person. And then if we try to do Forrest Gump as a movie title, what does the plan look like? So we see here that Forrest Gump, the movie title, is not being consumed by a person name. There's no action connecting these two. So if we tried to save this, this would be an illegal plan. And this is a way to tell you that this is something you need to revise, and you wouldn't be able to submit this to Marketplace. So this is what I mean by checking our annotations and plans frequently, and making sure, once again, that our utterances are natural and still within scope. Okay, so let's talk about prompt training. So Movie Agents has a lot of different prompts, and I'll show you those different flows. So first, what is a Bixby prompt? If a user's utterance doesn't have the information necessary, you may need to, Bixby will interrupt the execution and ask for more information. So we saw earlier the prompt, which genre are you in the mood for? Prompt training is what helps reinforce Bixby's understanding to a prompt. So for example, we have this outer here, what movie should I watch? You're prompted, which genre are you in the mood for? And then someone would say Western as the desired genre. Additionally, this capsule is a quiz, so each quiz question is going to be a prompt. We need to get an answer to move on to the next question. Oh, okay. All right, so sorry, 1 second. All right. And so again, we have what movie should I watch as an outer. Then movie genre at prompt for movie genre, help me choose. So this is when the user isn't sure what genre they want to select. So we have the prompt training, help me choose. And we see this route here, run quiz. We'll talk about this more in the next couple slides, but this will help initialize the quiz. So once the quiz starts and we have the first question, I think if you saw the example, how do you prefer to eat your steak? And then you had the answers, rare, medium, rare. So to answer those, again, you need some sort of response with prompt training. So here we have a funny one that says an answer with 5 words, and then the whole thing is tagged with answer. So why is that? I can show you in the planner. Reset the conversation. Since I added some training, I need to compile first before I can run natural language. So I'm going to try something like, okay, what movie should I watch? All right, and then help me choose. And let's see, so this is the prompt. Which historical figure would you prefer as a weekend travel companion? If we go to the debugger, we can see this little talking bubble here. I can zoom in if it's difficult to see. Okay, so we have this little talking bubble here to indicate that this is a pending input. We are required to provide an answer to move on with updating the quiz and moving on to the next question. So here we want to have training that indicates that this whole response is the answer to the quiz question. And the reason why we have an answer with 5 words is because the content of the answers we are interpreting not in the training, but in the JS, in the quiz logic. So that's something you'll learn about more in the session tomorrow, building Bixby. But essentially, what we want to take away from this is, with quizzes, if the answers are unrelated to our domain, so medium rare, rare steak, well done, this is outside of our movie domain. So we wouldn't have vocab or concepts to interpret those answers. So this is sufficient, and we can handle that mapping in the JS. Okay, so roots. This is the root flag here, help me choose. And we see it again here, play the movie quiz. When and why do we use them? So just as a reminder, again, roots are a way to reinforce the goal through a waypoint, through kind of like a vehicle to take you to a goal through a special waypoint. So play the movie quiz has this, if you can see, run quiz flag, which is always going to output movie genre. Same here, help me choose will output movie genre. When you're asking play the movie quiz as an outer example, you're ultimately trying to reach the goal output of finding a movie recommendation and outputting a movie recommendation. So, a question we often hear is, why don't we just train this example? Why do we need it as a flag here? Why can't we train the goal itself to run quiz? And the answer is, if you do that, your output would be movie genre, which is not what you want. You simply want run quiz as a waypoint to reach that movie output. Okay, so taking a step back to look at our data as a whole, if you saw the training tab, you just see that there's just 5 examples per page. And if we're trying to reach 100% learned utterances, have the status changed from that gray not learned to that blue learned status, we can't go through every single page. So there's a tool already available to you when you run a private or public submission. And that is called the Capsule Interpreter Report. So I can show that to you. Closing these here. I'm actually just going to delete this one. Okay, so first, if you are, thinking about submitting to Marketplace, you should have your Capsule team registered on Bixby Developer Center. That way you can start running private and public submissions. So once you've done that, you can go to this cloud here on the left. And we see that we have some submissions already, we've already run. So these green ones indicate that they've passed these private submissions. These locks indicate that they're private submissions, which are private to you. And it's really useful for checking the status of your NL training. So let's look at these ones which are rejected. They're a little bit more interesting. So these have illegal plans. So we can click on Capsule Interpreter Training. And this is going to give us a breakdown of our training as a whole. So we see the status here is rejected. We see that there are 32 learned utterances and 2 illegal plans. So if we want to investigate any of our not learned or illegal plans, we can look at the training ID. You could just copy and paste this into the search ID. Or in this case, this is actually in a different branch of this capsule. So I'm going to just show you really briefly what that looks like. Here. So if we try to look at this, again, it's just this person name is not consuming this movie title. So these are something that we would want to revise. Either, this could be due to some sort of annotation error or something that is completely out of scope, or it's a feature that you want to support and you need to add some, different, you need to remodel to support this. So I'm just going to show you some highlights. So this one, inconsistently annotated words or tokens. So often this is populated with a lot of kind of small words like prepositions or determiners, and that's expected because usually you're not tagging these type of words, but it could be part of your movie title concept, for example. So if you're tagging One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, over might appear here. What you want to keep an eye out for is if something is obviously sticking out. So if a token like a person's name is here, and you know that usually that's tagged, and it's showing up as unlabeled, that's when you want to look it up and make sure that you're not missing any annotation. Next is labeled text diversity, which I mentioned a little bit earlier when I was talking about we don't want to train just find horror movies or just horror. We want our training set to be balanced. So even with vocab, we don't want to overtrain just one value of a particular genre. So here we see that there's a total of 6 movie genres, 5 are unique, which is good. And then it'll show you the first top 3 words that you've labeled. So fantasy, action, documentaries. Annotation counts are also really important. So looking at your goals, your labels, and your flags, and all the counts that correspond to them. So for goals, it doesn't have to be perfectly equally distributed, of course. It depends on your capsule. So for example, if you are often using, if one goal is naturally more popular, so for example, in a weather capsule, obviously searching for a weather forecast is going to be a lot more common than looking up the barometric pressure. So it's okay if the count for the forecast goal is much higher than the latter goal, but if there's another goal that would be also pretty common, like checking the chance of rain, then you would want to balance things out if it looks weaker on one side. Okay, and then it's the same for labels as well, and that's the highlights of the capsule interpreter report. This we discussed with not learned, illegal plans. Unverified plans are when you are updating your model, maybe you're making some changes, and your training set has noticed that you've changed something in your model. And so it says to you, hey, you've made some changes. This plan needs to be verified before you can submit. So to do that, you could, after you've looked at your plan to make sure that those changes, for example, maybe you split up a movie, you split up a goal. So that synopsis example I had before with Finding Nemo, maybe you decide to split that up and have specifically just a find movie action and then maybe a find movie synopsis action separately. So if you've done something like that and you see that your training shows unverified plans, you could go to your training set and go to these 3 dots here, and you can verify your plans. Okay, so just to quickly wrap up, there's a couple other questions I get about your training not learning. So this can happen, as I mentioned before, training being not learned it happens when you, it's your default before you compile. But if you've compiled and it's still not learned, like we see in this example, it could be that maybe the syntax is a lot more differently formulated than your previous utterances. So if you have a lot of examples like find, horror movies with X or show horror movies with X, and then suddenly you have something like this, what's the movie with Constance Wu that came out last year called? You may have to add a couple more examples to get this to learn to update. My recommendation is always to have a set of core examples trained and then regularly test some untrained examples that are really common. Another reason is, may seem obvious, but it's conflicting annotation. So here, maybe I didn't tag anything here and I just saved it. Bixby Studio will alert you and say, before you tagged something similar with these values, comedies in this month, and it'll show you a confusion point, and then you can look at those and re-annotate. Another point for best practice is if you notice this example I just showed you was trained as a continuation. And by definition, continuation training should rely on previous context and wouldn't be able to exist in isolation. So we want to think about training our continuations in a way that requires context. So for example, which ones came out this month or would be more appropriate for a continuation. So this is your checklist before you make your public submissions and you decide to post to Marketplace. Aim for 100% learn so that you can have the best understanding. And then you want to reflect natural real-world speech. And you want to train diverse use cases for balance. So, and then test frequently and train iteratively. So thank you for listening. These are some other sessions that I kind of mentioned throughout mine. So I would definitely recommend if you want to check out hands-free Bixby Capsules tomorrow at 12:30 and some other Marketplace-related sessions tomorrow as well. Thank you.